Okay.
There we go. All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sal Masood. I'm chairing the subcommittee number 3 as part of the Region 14 Upper Rio Grande Flood Planning Group. Today is November 10th. Supposed to start at 10 o'clock. I believe we have quorum. So, Matt, want to go ahead and take roll?
Yes,
first?
sir. Yes. So for our subcommittee members, we do have Chairman Masood present here at the Council of Governments as the agenda posted. We also have Levi Bryant joining us. We also have Omar Martinez, who's the chair of the flood planning group. And then we also have Enrica Ochoa sitting in for Isela Dagnino, and she will be joining us shortly thereafter. We also do have several guests with us, as well as the AECOM team. And so those individuals will be reflected in the minutes. And so if somebody has just joined on just for the last few minutes, Gabe, I see that you are here. Can you remind me, what organization are you with?
No, I'm independent, just working with AECOM. I have 35 years experience with FMEs.
And your last name?
Duran, like the
Duran.
rock.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Oh, last time we didn't get to see your face. You were only able to join by phone. Okay, thank you.
Gabe is for
IBWC department. Okay. All right, great. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Well, then we can go ahead and get started.
All right. So we're moving on to item number 2. We're supposed to be approving the minutes from October 22nd and from September 30th, but I was just informed that the minutes are not yet 100% complete, and we would like to table that item for the next meeting. So I could entertain a motion from someone to do so.
So moved.
Right?
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Who said second?
Omar.
Omar. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Does anybody have any in opposition to this?
Please don't.
Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay.
All right. Item number 3, ACOM.
All right. Can you all hear me okay? This is Chris Wright.
I think that for those who are not presenting, if you want to just mute yourselves for right now, it seems like there might be a few that are.
A lot of static.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. This is the 3rd meeting for Subcommittee 3. This subcommittee, just to remind everyone, focuses on FMEs, or flood management evaluations, and FMSs, which are flood management strategies. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Jeff. So we've already done most of the introductions. I think there were a couple others that I saw on the phone that I didn't hear from. I know Dr. Bora, I think he's on the line from USIBWC. And I thought Delbert was going to join us, but it didn't look like he was on the line last I checked, so he might jump in. And it looks like Delbert can't make it, but he'll share his accounts with me, I guess, separately. I know he was talking to somebody else in his organization about their 2008 experience, but I guess he's not able to share that today. Is there anyone else on the line that we haven't mentioned yet?
This is Gonzalo. Just we're able to connect with you guys.
Great, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
And Eric Bangs is on the line from EP Water. He's on the water supply side. And Eric, we're going to be focused mainly on stormwater accounts today from historic flooding. So I'm not sure we'll get to allow you to present on your project that has this chain of sediment basins, which may have a flood mitigation purpose to them. So, I mean, you're welcome to jump off if you need to. It's a 3-hour meeting, but you know, we would like some information on that project if you have a chance at some point to provide the location and maybe a summary.
Okay, yes, I can do that. Right now I have another meeting that I should join, so let me join back with you guys here a little bit later.
Okay, like I said, and yeah, if we don't get to that part of the meeting and you can just send an email or something that just describes a little bit about the project and any studies that have been done and a cost and a location, that's the main information we would like to get as soon as we can.
Okay, I will send that out to you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about the objective of this subcommittee very quickly, and we'll also then get it right into a discussion on historical flood events from some of the stakeholders that have joined us today. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for making the time. It is a 3-hour meeting, so I hope you all have some lunch with you, but we really appreciate you being here and discussing your accounts. Then after we get through the discussion of the historic events, we're going to develop a list of studies and strategies as well as the needs that come from these events. We definitely want to define what the need is. We may not have time to actually develop the strategy depending on how long it takes for those to get through their accounts. That might be for another meeting. What we want to make sure we get through today is discuss the process for identifying and creating action to develop FMEs and FMSs throughout the region, because that's what we have to include in the tech memo coming up due December 2nd as a draft and January 7th to the TWDB. So we want to make sure we get to that so we can vote on that process at the end of the meeting. And then after that, we'll just discuss tentative future meeting dates, which I don't think we have any scheduled for this subcommittee after today. And with that, I'll just hand it off to Jeff because I know we've got a lot of ground to cover today.
So the main thing we're going to talk about today is discussion of historical flood events, and we're going to make 2 passes through on these flood events. The first time through, we're going to basically talk about experience and identify problems that occurred during the flood events. And we're going to try to stick with the big regional flood events, which are the focus of this particular plan. So we're certainly going to cover 2006 and 2021 in these discussions. And then we're going to have a second pass through where we say, all right, this happened in the events, and these are the needs that these problems highlight. So we're going to do this by letting people talk about their experience. Let me first figure out how many people want to talk. I know Gonzalo Cedillos is going to want to talk. I know Enrique is going to talk. I know that Dr. Blair from the irrigation district is going to talk sometime around 11 o'clock your time. I know that Gabe Duran is going to talk about his experience while with the IBWC in the 2008 flood. I think David Cantu wants to talk about his experience in his town, and he sent us some information already. Who else wants to, and Gilbert Saldana, do you want to be able to give your experience?
I might have to pass on that, Jeff. I probably might not be able to hang around for that,
All right.
that period
Okay.
of time. Sorry.
So, Omar, do you want to talk about your experience? Yes, or no?
I'll
You will, right? So we have, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, and we have 3 hours. But remember, we have to pass through this twice. So I'm basically going to try to keep this down to roughly 20 minutes per person. And I want to explain how I'm kind of controlling this to make everybody get through on time. And we're doing this by having each person talk in 2 different parts. In the first part, we're going to be taking notes. Alejandra Marco from El Paso AECOM is going to take notes. And Alejandra, would you bring up your screen? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a person talk about, we're going to note who the person is that's going to discuss the issue. We're going to talk about the particular flood, and we're going to talk about an area, and then we're going to have a description of what happened in the area. And what I'm going to try to do is keep everybody on point, and I don't want people at this point to say what they think is needed. I just want a description of what happened in the flood, so we can talk about needs later. So I'm going to basically, what we need to know is where access was prevented, where there was flooding in the streets, whether there was damage to homes, whether there was blocking of culverts, more a description of the damages in different areas, and we'll note them by area what the damages were. So one person might discuss 4 or 5 areas of the city that they're familiar with and what those impacts were. Then we're going to have, we're just, the first time through, just going to get a list of 8 areas and the damages. This is basically defining the problems, is this step. Then we're going to have, on the second pass through, we're going to, after we've gone through all the people presenting to make sure we get through them all, we're going to go back through and talk about the problem and what those problems, what the needs are that come out of the problem. And I'll give an example of that later. We're also going to have a series of questions that are going to be, we're going to take notes with Lily Cartwright. Lily, you want to pull up your table? And Lily's going to ask questions about what was your perception of the primary public concerns in that event? Was early warning adequate? Were there problems with emergency route access or with critical infrastructure? Were there any problems with how we were able to clean up after the event? And then talk a bit about agency coordination, whether that went smoothly or whether there were problems with that we probably ought to bring up so we can address those. So we're going to go through these one by one. I'm going to take it back now, Lily. And let's just talk briefly about the 2 big events that we're going to be focusing on in the El Paso area. We talked about this in an earlier meeting. But basically, the 2006 storm was largely on the west side of town. The darker blues here are the deeper, the more intense rainfall and large amounts of rainfall. So 2006 was a multi-day storm that dropped a lot of rain over 3 days, with the biggest problems being on the west side. This storm that you all just went through in August of this year had a huge amount of rainfall happen in a very short time, much different kind of storm. So very intense short storm. And it was mostly in the east central part of the town, of the city, that caused the problems. And we're also going to talk briefly about the issue that occurred in Presidio. So let's go through, and we'll start off with Gonzalo. Can you can you talk about your experience? And we're going to have Enrique talk first. Enrique, will you pull up your map and talk about the different areas that you're familiar with? And as background, Enrique also talked with Kareem Dallo and has taken notes from Kareem Dallo on what the problems were in 2006.
Good morning, Enrique Ochoa, Stormwater Operations. Okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit, and I did get a hold of a PowerPoint. I don't know if you can see it. It's the 2006. This is mainly on the west side, and the big issue we had was the I-10 being closed. This is an area of Copia and Piedras. That's kind of the area that where we build the I-10, the gateways. This is another one, Cotton and Missouri, Elm Street. That's our issue. We have a lot of water going through that one. Then on the west side, Bluff Canyon, a lot of the water coming from the mountain, a lot of velocity. We had erosion, sinkholes. Another one, center area. This is around the bakery, Bowie Bakery. I think this is on this corner. Silver Springs. This is the arroyo and had a lot of sediment going down. And on this one, we have built a dam, a new dam to control the sediment. More pictures from that area. Like was mentioned, it's a lot of the damage was on the west side. Silver Spring was the big one. Shadow Mountain and south of Silver Springs. This is the Coronado Channel near Cap Rock. Again, another one on Coronado Channel. Some of the channel wash out. This is Coronado Channel next to Mesa Street. Same area. Mesa and Thunderbird, a lot of debris. This is a mobile home site and on Mesa and Thunderbird. The old Blockbuster. More pictures. Mesa Street and I think this is Balboa. A lot of water going on that same area that was going through the homes, and now this is a park. A lot of the sediment going into the homes. I think all this is the same picture from above. Fiesta and De Leon, same. This is the Coronado Channel. Same area. This is a little bit downstream. De Leon and Belton, close to the freeway. Then we have Mesa Hills, a lot of erosions. More Mesa Hills, same area. Then Wrestler and Helen of Troy, more to the west, kind of northwest. Helen of Troy. This is Shadow Mountain, close to Mesa Hills. This is also on the west side. This is another picture. Well, this picture is from the river. Like you see, it's almost bank to bank. This is on the west side. That's one of the new ponds that were built kind of down the area of Ojo de Agua. Free Hills area. Doniphan and Frontera. More Doniphan and Frontera. And South Mountain. And these are more on the northeast, Kenworthy. Fairbanks. Here you see the sediment, all the water coming through the street. This is where we built a new structure here, the Fairbanks, to control sediment. This was a project. Fairbanks and Rushing, the same area. And there's some others that I found out from Canotillo and Trans Mountain area, but those I don't know a lot about those. So this is kind of what happened. I think Gonzalo has more experience on that, but this was mainly a lot of rain washing down and bringing a lot of sediment with it to the city.
Can you just pull up a map real quick, Enrique, and basically give us a general tour of where this happened? You can just do it from zoomed out that far. Just kind of say, for instance, where the issues were on Coronado Channel and where the issues were on Donovan. And
okay.
I don't think we see it right close up, but we can just sort of.
This is the Mesa Hills. One of the big erosions happened in this area. It's pretty close to the oxidation dam, and there was a lot of water coming from this channel and these two channels. The one that we saw, Silver Springs, is this channel right here. All the street washed out. It blocked Shadow Mountain, and this is where there used to be the Blockbuster in this area, and pretty much washed it away. And the water came through here, and this is where a lot of the erosion happened, where these two channels met. The other Frontera in Donovan, this area where the dam, the Keystone Dam, is downstream of the dam. This was a very high water. A lot of this is flat areas. Rest there. This area here had a lot of well, pretty much all the west side, but these are the areas that we had a lot of water coming in. And this is the other area that I don't have pictures, but it's the Mowat area that all the culverts got plugged with the sediment coming from the mountain, and in this section.
Can you just show them where Fairbanks is?
Fairbanks is just across the mountain, and is right here.
So we had it on the east side also, that's the point.
Yeah, this is Fairbanks, and Kenworth is along this area. So a lot of the pictures you saw, were mainly on this area, plus whatever happened, like this was kind of the area that concentrated most of the rain on 2006.
All right, so Lily, can you ask your questions on this issue for the city's experience? And Gonzalo, you can chime in on these answers too, and we'll ask you separately on your experience in specific locations, but maybe you can chime in with Enrique on the 2006 event. Lily, you want to lead through the questions?
Sure. Do you want me to share my screen?
Sure.
Are we good looking at the map? Okay. So could you tell us the primary public concerns you heard during or after the event?
Good morning, this is Gonzalo Cedillos. Yes, it was back in 2006, although I was not in a authority position at that time. I was doing capital assets for the city, but was their city engineer prior to that event. But very much aware was kind of what was going on. Not a lot of detail, but what Enrique has exposed this morning, it is, it's proof of what the city endured back in 2006. But I think the lessons that I observe, and this is my observations we need to look at the political setting and the social setting at that time. The city had more than a decade.
I can't hear you. I don't know if someone else's mic is on. But could everyone else turn their mics off unless you're speaking, please?
So Gonzalo, what were the public concerns? Is what we're trying to, we have a lot of questions.
Like every time that something happens, what happened? Why when we're prepared? Why, what lead to that? Obviously, there's not a lot of questions answered other than right now, let's just rebuild, let's just get back to safety. Like I said, I was not in that authority at that time, but there was a lot of assessment. But again, for more than a decade, the city enjoyed stable weather. So, most of the development prior to that event, it was very, very aggressive. The politics of and the cost of taxing and things like that was mostly optimal, which that affect a lot of the administrative decisions that a lot of departments, especially the street department, who was responsible for precisely the maintenance of these structures. And obviously, year after year, this maintenance was costly, and not to mayors who were every other 2 years getting to be in office, were trying to keep costs or taxes as minimum. So a lot of this maintenance was deferred. So we see throughout the years, there was a lot of sediment being moved, pushed around, just ready to be moved. And what happened in 2006 was a wake-up call to say, we need to look at our, how to prepare better ourselves when we see structures and upstream structures, and we see the evidence of accumulated sediment or structures that have failed, but we have not addressed them because they're not visible. Nobody looks at them. So that was basically, the city was very vulnerable at that time. So when this happened, obviously the question was not answered in that manner, but I'm just giving you my opinion. Basically, that's what triggered back in 2006 that they regrouped, so they decided to create a stormwater utility. And that's what basically triggered that we needed to do more and obviously avoid the overtaxing. Anyway, all of the exhibits that Enrique, it's true, it was an extraordinary event back in 2006, compounded by the fact that the river was running high. And most of the systems in the city is gravity flowing into the river. Most of the systems that we have in the city of El Paso are surface drainage. They all go to some kind of a deposit or basin or pond, and all of it is gravity. Just the minimal cost that a developer has to bear in order to basically develop the land and make it cost effective to sell and develop. Obviously, after the history of the city of El Paso, years when they have suffered situations like this, it reacts and it started putting additional structures like the advent of pumping station. It wasn't back in the 20s when the city of El Paso downtown was flooded that they had the first pumping station.
Gonzalo, could I please interrupt you for a second? I just want to make sure we get our questions answered here. So
Yes.
Specifically for the storm in 2006.
Yes.
What you heard in the community, among the community, was that they were unaware of, preparations that the city had and were surprised?
Most of
Or
it is
what exactly?
what can the city do and who's going to solve this problem?
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's
so
basically.
how was early warning? Enrique, do you have any particular insights you want to give on community response? You're on mute.
I think the primary public concern was why this is happening, what the city is not doing any, or why the city is not prepared for this.
All right. On early warning, Enrique, was there any early warning that we needed? Did people feel like they were given sufficient warning to prepare for this?
That one, I don't know exactly. I think we didn't have any warning at that time.
Gonzalo, what do you think? You think you had
No,
warnings?
he's correct. Like I said, the city was in a very complacent, comfortable ambience at that time. That's why I was trying to give a little bit of explanation. We had ample good weather for more than a decade, and all of a sudden it hits us.
All right, so emergency, were there?
We did not have any. I didn't hear of any warning. I was not an authority, but there was no warning.
As a resident, I can tell you that we didn't have any warning. So it was just raining, and it was just whatever we heard on the news. And of course, we'll hear on the news that it's going to rain, but it's not always accurate. So if we were told, maybe we brushed it off, but we didn't really have an early warning like the ones that we know exist now, right?
All right, so were there problems with emergency route access? Were there individual hospitals or critical facilities like treatment plants or wastewater plants or anything that were affected by the flood? All right.
Jeff, I was not aware.
There was certainly the IH-10 was overtopped, right?
Yes.
Yes. But we've experienced that problem several times. And we knew that.
Okay. So how about cleaning up after the flood? Cleaning up after the flood, was there sufficient equipment on the part of the road department to be able to, how quickly was the city able to respond and get back to where they were before the event?
The city responded immediately with the forces that they had at that time. And what was it significant? Was it enough? I really can't answer the question. The street department director knew, because I've seen him year after year preparing his budget proposal, and most of the time they were cut. So I think that this is one of the things that they take off and defer, hoping that nothing's going to happen.
So how about agency coordination during the flood? Was there a coordinated effort on the part of the county and the city and the irrigation district and the IBWC? Was there some sort of communication in how to address the issues that were arising? Was there some committee or organization that was planning how to deal with the conditions that were happening? Some multi-agency committee, or was the city pretty much left to its own city and county?
The city did have dialogue, and beginning with the street department director, who was basically responsible. So he did have dialogues with the different agencies. Now, how effective they were, how cooperative they were, I really can't tell you what.
Could you say which other agencies they were, Gonzalo?
TxDOT to start.
Okay.
TxDOT to start, IBWC because of the river, and the irrigation district, obviously, in the county.
So
possibly the Office of Emergency Management.
Gilbert Saldana, do you have any input on this from the county standpoint? Were you available? Do you know what the county was doing at this time with this flood?
Hey, Jeff, my understanding is there was all of the multi-agencies responding, I think being coordinated by the Office of Emergency Management.
But was there some sort of plan that was dealing with how to respond to this level of flood? Was there anything that basically laid out responsibilities of the different agencies and how who was responsible for what in terms of the areas where they had overlapping responsibilities, like between the irrigation district and the IBWC and the city?
No, I'm sorry, I don't have that, that information. I wasn't really involved in it as far as that type of response. Like I said, I think the Office of Emergency Management might have much better information regarding that.
Okay. Gonzalo, let's move on to you. Did you have any particular experiences beyond what Enrique was talking about in 2006 that you want to relate?
Other than what I expressed before, the reaction, and it was just a multitude of problems throughout the city that the city was having a hard time to attend to or prioritize. Not necessarily prioritize, but who do you start looking at without putting other problems that are important, because all of them were important. Everybody was in need. It was just throughout the city. So it was difficult. It was difficult at that time because it was just scrambling back and forth. A lot of people just trying to provide some answers and comfort and assistance at that time.
All right. So Lily, what could you do with more warning? You could say you could prioritize response to predictions of areas with higher rainfall. Okay, Enrique, can you go on to 2021? What happened in 2021? And it's back to you, Alejandra. I think, Lily, you can put away your table for the time being. And you want to... Enrique, you going to talk about 2021?
Yeah, let me share my screen. Okay, 2021, most of the rain that we got, we did have some on the west side, especially Ojo de Agua and Bear Ridge, where we had some damage, some damage in the channels around this area. And but most of the rain came through here on the northeast, and some of the other rain event that we had was here on the Montana, McRae, Lee Trevino area on the east side, but they were very localized rain events on this Album Park, Sam Sneed, Pico Norte, here where that's one of our ponds, Orkney. But what I think the most impact we had was here on the central area with Dam 2 and Dam 4. that a lot of this water came and just kind of bypassed the dams and went down the street. The other area is here in the Fort Bliss, and on the news there's these two arroyos that connect to a conduit that goes to the Fort Bliss Sound. Those were like overwhelmed, and the covers, the manhole covers blew on. They were geysers down the street, and a lot of sediment again on these rain events. On especially this area, there was a lot of washout along I-54. The water blew a couple of rock walls here on the Fort Bliss area. The sediment and all made its way all the way to the Diana Ditch. Fort Bliss Sump was almost full. And Fairbanks didn't do that bad. The structure we built, it functioned to prevent the sediment from going into the street. And pretty much this was the area that got more or was affected the most by the events. This area here.
Can you talk about what happened in terms of damages? Did major streets overflow? Were people were there damages to houses? Were there critical routes intercepted?
Yes, on August 12, this was the big rain event, and this dam is a small one, but it overtopped and pushed all the sediment from all this area here into Alabama and Fort down here all the way to this dam and into Elm Street. And all this, there was a lot of damage on cars, this area, these houses, there's a daycare here. It trapped a lot of cars on this area. This one on Memphis,
Can you please say the intersection right there, which two streets you were pointing right there?
Fort and Alabama. All this is one of the Paso water reservoirs tanks, and all this access road wash away and end up here on this dam. Here the water was overtopping the dam over the emergency spillway down the street to Elm and down here. Also the gateways, with all the rain, they are 50 foot. They probably were at the water was going through the outlet, the conduit, about 43, 44 feet from the bottom of the pond. So it was a lot of water. We had to have pumps ready to empty the ponds, just being prepared for the next storm. Over here by the central area, this area, the Palisades, we have a project to build a dam, but we are waiting on approval from city, and we had some opposition from the city rep and the open space, but we need this dam to prevent some of the water that's coming down here that caused a lot of damage down here in this area on the New York Channel, kind of Stanton, and I don't remember the other street. This is Stanton and Boston.
So how about in the river terraces? Any issues in flooding in the river terraces?
You know where
below the interstate?
they were minimal on this area.
Okay.
We didn't have a lot of just regular calls on the on-site pondings and sites like that here on the lower valley and the upper valley.
Can you explain that issue, please?
Yeah, like the issues we have here on the, especially on, well, on the all the on-site ponding, it's that they were designed to hold the water from the streets, but over time they have built, raised the properties, they have constructed rock walls, or they have prevented the water that was supposed to go from the street into their properties.
Can you zoom in? Can you zoom
Yeah,
into a property?
let me get this.
I'm not sure everybody knows what on-site ponding means.
Let me just stop it there. Like from this street, all these lots are supposed to get the water from half of the street and allow it to go into their property, and they can take care of that water. The issue we're having is like they were designed as on-site ponding, but they start building walls. They are preventing the water from going to the ponds. They have added landscape, or they have raised the elevation, so the water is not going into the houses, and it's creating like it's going into other properties or staying on the street.
And where did that issue happen? Just generically in the city?
It's usually the upper valley and the lower valley, where the old farmlands, where it's a flat area that there's high water table, or there's not enough slope to create a pond or something to fix it. So it has to be designed as an on-site ponding, but people are building and not letting they are not functioning as they should.
Okay.
So we need to enforce something to prevent this from happening.
So Lily, can we go on to your questions real quick?
Yes.
Let's go straight to the early warning question. Do we have early warning for this event? This one in August, was the public, did we know in advance? Were we expecting the interstate to overtop, for instance?
We were expecting rain, and we were aware that we were getting a storm, but we didn't know what kind or what size. It's still like sometimes there's a chance of a big storm, but it's not. They cannot precisely tell us you're getting hit this big.
So there wasn't any identification that this was going to be an extreme storm. It was going to be a storm, but there wasn't any. This could be the 150-year storm or whatever it turned out to be, right?
So we have a consultant that does. He's a hydrometeorologist, so he provides reports to us during the monsoon season, where if we're expecting rain, right? He did submit that report to us, and this is how Enrique is able to deploy his people, but we knew it was a severe threat, but we didn't know exactly where it was going to hit. There, I mean, I think the east area was identified, but there's not like a pinpoint location where it's gonna fall. So that's what we've done. That's what we do every time throughout the year, and we get these reports updated like twice a week during monsoon and any updates as needed. But it's still hard to pinpoint whether it is gonna hit and where it's gonna hit.
So there was a specific alert given out by this service prior to this event.
Yes, he did send the report.
All right. Do we have any issues on emergency routes getting into hospitals, or it was just the IH-10 issue, right? IH-10 was affected.
Yes, but I
IH-10
think
was
most of the routes were accessible. The only issue we had was on I-10.
okay. Was there?
Sorry, I was going to ask Enrique or Gisela on the I-10 area that flooded. Was that right around the Magnolia Pond area, or do you know if there was any communication regarding the Magnolia, the pump station pond that was recently built, and whether it reaching its capacity had anything to do with I-10 flooding?
Yeah, that one, the pump, they function properly, but there was a lot of water coming down, and we didn't have any issues with the pump station, but they were overwhelmed. And Magnolia, it's undersized for what it needs to pump, but it worked.
So is that something where if we were to propose to increase the pumping capacity at Magnolia Pump Station Pond, would that have prevented I-10 from overtopping?
Yes, in that area.
Okay. And I also wanted to clarify, so who is that consultant, the hydrometeorologist?
His name's Eric Metzger.
And
how
Chris,
how much warning?
Yeah,
how much
Chris,
warning did he provide on that 2021? So I was just curious how much warning he provided. Like typically, would he provide before a storm comes?
So it varies. He sends us updates. This update, I don't recall, but this update may have come in like the night before. So and sometimes send them to us like that morning. So it just depends on the weather patterns and how things change.
So was there any agency coordination? How did the county and the city and the irrigation district and so on, was there some coordination between the people that control stormwater in the region? Was there some sort of regular communication during the event?
We are part of the OEM, and Leticia she works with us, and she's in constant contact with the office. So anything that it's coordinated is through her. She's our rep with them, and she's in charge of all the coordination.
All right.
And there were meetings with the Office of Emergency Management, I believe, that morning. And there were notices put out, flash floods and for the whatever time it was in effect.
Yeah. And going back a little bit to Chris on the I-10 flooding, also the Dallas pump station is in that area. So those two were working, those two pump stations, and they were working, but the amount of water was they got overwhelmed.
Okay.
Okay,
thanks. So let's move on and let Gabe Duran talk a bit about the Presidio event in in 2008?
Gabe, you're on mute.
Thank you for having me today. I'm very happy to share my experience in 2008.
So will you, Lily, bring up the map, please.
For 2008 was a very large storm event that came about in Mexico, in the Chihuahua area, Delicias, Camargo area in Mexico. They received about a week's worth of rain. Let's say a storm lasted about a week. And the Rio Conchos, which is, and if I may have control here, is right through here, in this area here, bringing tons of water down from Mexico. Upstream, not so much an event, but down through here. 2008 washed out all the levees from just beyond the railroad track here. All these levees were destroyed. And big sinkholes developed where flood just eroded large parts of the floodplain. Main problem I saw there was not enough early communication between our field managers and IBWC and management. We sent them down there. We knew that there was a flood going to happen, but the intensity was such that there was very little attenuation of the flow, and levees were overwhelmed and overtopped. And by the time Commissioner Marin at the time got involved, most of the damage had already occurred. And you might recall that Commissioner Marin died in a plane wreck, plane crash. Looking at flooding conditions in Mexico below Luis Leon Dam and the Presidio area. But if I may control again, all this area here up to the railroad track was Lake Presidio. It had become flooded because the levees had completely failed in this area. Some flow back down the Civil Creek, and we experienced IBW experienced the levee failure there because of the beaver dug a hole underneath one of the levees and subsequently caused the levee to fail in that area. But in response, the IBWC laid or placed about 20,000 sandbags, and we protected the levee with 2 miles of heavy plastic laid alongside the levee to keep further failure from happening. And of course, all this was done in coordination with the Texas Office of Emergency Management. And that's pretty much what happened in Presidio. There was not too much damage to the city itself. The city of Ojinaga, the sister city to Presidio, did experience a lot of flooding. So as you can see right there, the city of Ojinaga is on the left-hand side, and about a quarter of it in this area, if I may, was all inundated, flooded up to maybe waist high. Main reason that a lot of this flooding occurred is the plugging with sediment at just below Alamito Creek down here. It's sediment, as you might have heard in other parts of this presentation, is the main problem in any flooding event. The sediment tends to collect in the lowest part, which is normally the river, of course, or the trib, and plugs up the trib with or the river channel, and then the water just backs up and causes all kinds of havoc. There you go. You did mark it. Also in Mexico, there was this water treatment plant here was flooded, and the levees around the ponds are completely destroyed, and all that sewage just made its way.
But the issue was that there was sediment that accumulated in the river downstream at where that one arroyo comes in, correct?
Yeah, Alamito Creek, that's always been the case. Anytime a valley empties out into the next valley, there's a canyon stretch. So this area, as you can see in this image here, you start entering a mountainous area, and then the water has to squeeze its way into the canyon. And then anytime you slow down the flow, you drop all the sediment out of it. And that was the case. And this normally happens, as was mentioned earlier, during complacency. When the weather's good and you haven't had any flooding, and you've had these little minor river flows, and they bring the sediment over a period of time, and it just boils down to a lack of maintenance in the channel. And
so the event that happened was it didn't overtop the levees, and the levees were designed for the 25-year flood, correct?
That's correct. A 25-year flood, 42,000 CFS for those levees in Presidio. But like I mentioned, it was a swift flows with mountainous areas in Mexico and the United States. So you're not dealing with a real flat, lazy river in this area. The river is very active and very swift when you have these flooding situations. So much so that even a little bush in the channel will divert the flow against the levee and start eroding it. So it's a strange phenomenon, but even a small obstruction in the river, when you have those swift flows, will have a tremendous effect on the levees.
But the point was, this was not a 100-year storm. It didn't get in Presidio, but it was a near thing on the levee, and it was something close to the 25-year, correct?
Yes, correct. 25-year or maybe above, maybe a 50-year event. But the levees were easily overwhelmed with that flow.
Okay.
Easily. In fact, right at the, or just a little bit downstream, there was 2 inches of freeboard, and at any point during that situation, the seepage through the levee had weakened them, and at any point the levees could just wash away underneath your feet. So not only is it catastrophic for the community, but people working, excuse me, the levees, because they're in danger, because you'll be washed away if those levees break and you happen to be standing at the wrong spot.
Can we talk a little bit about Little Box Canyon?
Okay, now moving upstream, you're in the rectification project. You've passed through, going upstream, you passed through the Boundary Preservation Project, which was a failed project USIBWC tried in the 80s to identify the international boundary better and improve the hydraulics and the river efficiency. But as you might recall, during the 80s, period of high water, and many times the IBWC would do a work, and when I mean IBWC, Mexico and the United States, it would wash away because of high flows. So that the Boundary Preservation Project wasn't successful. But moving upstream, you have the Rectification Project, which stretches from Little Box Canyon. So if you move your image a little bit further, no, okay, I see it.
You can still point.
Yes, I'm pointing now. All this area here. Now this area has experienced degradation of the farming community through that whole stretch right there, basically because of sediment buildup at Little Box Canyon. Little Box Canyon is the entrance to the Boundary Preservation Project, as I mentioned. It's to river. With years, the river has been rectified and a channel made, and Many of the meanders that slow down the flow were removed. So now you have a swift moving river butting up against an obstruction at Little Box Canyon, and you have tremendous sediment deposit. And one area I wanted to talk a little bit about is that area that you have in green right here, which is the Navarrete Arroyo. The Navarrete Arroyo comes out of Mexico and just fills the river with sediment. And of course, all that sediment makes its way downstream and eventually plugs up the laterals and drains, and then farmers are discouraged from developing their farmland. And this happens over a long period of time. It's not an overnight exciting event like 2006 or 21. It's more of a steady decline of the river efficiency. And a drain that worked well at one point doesn't work that well. So a farmer has problems with high water tables that poisons the root systems of their crop, and they get discouraged and they don't do it. So they don't plant. So that's been happening over many, many years in the rectification project.
So is Joanna still on the call? We have Joanna. Did we lose Joanna?
Jeff, let me get a hold of her and I'll give you a time when she's going to be back. Okay, let me check with her right now.
Now, if I may, Jeff, with regarding to early warning, 2006 and I'm sure 21 and previous floods, USIBWC has a standing MOU with the National Weather Service to provide warnings. We had a direct contact.
I'm sorry, you're cutting out. Could you repeat the last sentence you said, Gabe?
Yes, IBWC has a direct MOU, standing MOU with National Weather Service, the riverine system. I believe the gentleman's name is Frank Bell, and he coordinates between IBWC and the National Weather Service to provide warnings for potential storms to the stem of the Rio Grande. So I don't know if this was, and I'm sure, let's get me back to that. I'm sure IBWC would have passed on this information, potential flooding on the stem of the Rio Grande during major events, or would. It's part of IBWC standard operating procedure. And I'm sure Delbert can speak more on this, and since he's not here today, I just thought it would be beneficial for the group to know this.
So, Dr. Bora, do you have any input on what Gabe's been saying?
Yes, but giving the warning, I think that's mainly for the river, because our responsibility is along the Rio Grande. So we don't have any jurisdiction over the inland areas. And regarding Presidio, those levees failed, but the town was saved because there are some low-lying farms, so water actually stored in those farms, and the town of Presidio was not affected during 2008 flood.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. And I was mentioning that that standing MOU is for flooding or potential flooding, storm warning on the stem of the Rio Grande.
I had to get ready for my construction meeting. I went out to my construction meeting.
And I was going to ask Gabe and Dr. Bora. Gabe had mentioned that the Cibolo Creek levees failed. Were those USIBWC levees, or were those county-owned?
No, well, let me clarify. The Cibolo Creek levees did not fail. They're owned by the Corps of Engineers, and we were coordinating with the Corps of Engineers during that event. It was on a USIBWC levee just upstream of Cibolo Creek, right there where the beaver had dug a hole that really caused the levee to fail in that area, which is kind of ironic that that little animal could cause so much problem, but he sure did.
So, thank you, Gabe. Omar, you want to talk a bit about the irrigation district experience in 2006 and 2021?
Yes, gladly. I'll start with 2021 because it's simple for us. As you mentioned, flooding 2021 was in central northeast area, and so it didn't quite impact our operations very much. We did get some flooding around the Litrevino area in East El Paso that ended up overtopping the Mesa drain right as it gets to Feather Lake. And so I have a picture of that to share at a later date. But essentially, rains over time for a couple of days, they pretty much accumulated to the point where the Mesa drain was overwhelmed, and the Mesa drain is so wide that you can think of it as a type of storage area as well, similar to Feather Lake and its extensions. So it was just too much water accumulated. Most of that water came from northern parts of the county, and it just ends up there. And so it was just way too much water, even for Feather Lake. There was also a plugging at the extension to Feather Lake. I don't recall the name of that extension, and that is why everything else backed up. But had that not happened, we think the Mesa drain would have been fine. Eventually, to allow the water at the Mesa drain to lower, we opened up that water. I'm sorry, the gates at where Del Valle High School is at, right around that area, right before 375. And so water essentially flowed into the Mesa drain further into the county, where it eventually ended up throughout the other areas of the drain system, and ideally back into the Rio Grande. I'm not even sure if it got that far. So having said that, I was not part of the district in 2006. I was still in high school. So the accounts that I tell are from Dr. Al Blair and from Mr. Reyes, our general manager. And so in summary, the 2006 flood for the irrigation district was there were essentially three major effects. First, the riverine flow was to such an extent that we did have to coordinate with Reclamation, IBWC, City of El Paso County, and the private sector, including Lake Job, to ensure that we did. This is a story Mr. Reyes tells. That apparently, the City of El Paso was considering whether to evacuate around 200,000 people in downtown El Paso because the river was so close to overtopping. So eventually what ended up happening is that EP1 opened up its canal system to take off some of the pressure on the river. And so essentially all of our canals and drains were full of river water. This was during the irrigation season. So essentially irrigation functions. We tried our best to deliver water, but the whole county, the whole lower valley was wet anyway. So we didn't have anywhere for that water to go. So we just slowly allowed it to flow downstream. My understanding, and this is the story that Mr. Reyes says, is that one of the reasons why that evacuation did not occur was because we were able to relieve that pressure on the river through the irrigation system. We don't have hydrology to back up that story, but it's one of those neat stories that Mr. Reyes likes to tell. The second impact, and this is at the end of this. Actually, I'm going to talk about during the storm, and I did add it to the chat. There were wasteways that were essentially backed up. So riverine water was backing up to the wasteways and making their way into actual drains. And so that meant that these wasteways failed, and there was some damages to structures. It wasn't anything major to the point where there was like any area flooding, but it did occur, and so we did have to go back and repair after that. And then the third major impact for the irrigation district was sediment. There was a lot of sediment to handle in both our drain and canal system at the end of this. So a lot of the heavy flows that came with the riverine flooding ended up at the irrigation system. And so for us, the impact was to repair all of that. Apparently, it took about 2 to 3 years just of regular maintenance to to go back and clear up and allow the canals and drains to go back to their original design capacity, because the sediment loads were so heavy that we weren't able quite to do it that way. So during the flooding, go ahead.
So were the sediment loading in the canal due to what was diverted at American Canal, or was it due to the flow in from the uncontrolled arroyos in the eastern part of the county?
The sediment obviously originated from other areas of the county in the Upper Valley. And so where we picked it up was at American Canal. And so because the American Canal is concrete lined, it very swiftly pushed all the sediment down into the Riverside Canal and then onward. The Franklin Canal was also used to divert much more upstream. And so the sediment there, essentially, as the Franklin Canal, it's pretty much straight up until it gets to the El Paso Zoo area. And that area, I believe there was some heavy sediment and a very minor flood around the zoo area, but it was nothing that the zoo couldn't handle afterwards. But because the canal at the Franklin Canal turns twice on that area, very sharp, pretty much 90-degree turns on that area, it was one of the difficult areas to handle. So the Franklin Canal could not handle as much floodwater as we would have liked, because it very quickly plugged up around these areas. Back into the diversion from the American Canal onto the Riverside Canal. Again, it all got pushed down thanks to the concrete lining, and then it ended up in the Riverside Canal, and then at that point through our drain system and whatnot. Henceforth, one comment I did want to add, and this is something that Mr. Robert Rios, our water master, said, is during these major flood events, because canals are at a higher elevation than roads in areas outside of the incorporated city of El Paso limits, many residents have to use canals as their only means to transportation, because some of that localized ponding, they end up flooding streets and it become unsafe. So they instead prefer to use the canals, even if they're wet, even if they're muddy, to get to where they need to get to. Drains, not so much. Those get major washouts fairly quickly.
So they use the canal banks as a road, basically?
Yes, during storm events. There's in 2006, 2021, any storm we've gotten, they use that. They use the canals as roads.
Okay. Let's, David Cantu, you want to talk briefly about the issues in San Elizaria? I know you sent us pictures, so I think we're pretty well briefed on that, but if you might tell us just a little bit of your story on San Elizario, since you responded earlier.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yep. If you want to take control to show
for us, the issue with us is that we experience a lot of different rain situations. Typically, our historic district is the one that gets flooded, and we still have a lot of open area farmlands and some drain systems that the irrigation district has in place. So a lot of the water runs into those, but the low-lying areas on the list that we gave you are typically those places that get flooded out with any kind of rain situation. And something that was not mentioned here is that in 2015, September, we did get a lot of rain in like maybe 4 days consistently. That flooded out our historic district, our park that's at Richardson, a couple of the subdivisions, and the school districts were having issues with the water coming in down so fast, and a lot of water coming in through the roofs. So a couple of schools had to release their students early for safety precautions. But it pretty much is something that commonly happens in those areas when we do get a massive amount of rain. In 2006, I was out of town. I was in Silver City. So what I heard from people down here is that the flooding was happening in El Paso, not in the valley, but that there was concerns about the river because of what was happening upstream. That they were concerned that maybe that water would come down through the river and possibly break the levees in the low-lying areas where San Elizario, Islera, Socorro, Fabens, and Tornillo.
So-
That was the main concern from what I heard from people back then.
So the flooding that hit San Elizaria, was that simply low-lying areas accumulating water because they couldn't drain, or was that flow that came from upstream that came into San Elizario that caused the issue, or was it pretty much local excessive
It's
rain?
pretty much built up from the area, rain falling down at the time. I haven't really experienced any kind of situation where the water is coming from upstream flooding us or potentially causing a flood, except for the concerns with the river. Uh, the other possibility would be if we had a massive rainfall in the Clint, the mountain areas in Horizon Clint, that would make its way down to our area. But our water table is really high here. I mean, you could dig 20 feet and you got good water, maybe even 10 feet in some areas. So if we get a lot of rain, the water has nowhere to go. So it just builds up and it finds those low-lying areas, just like anywhere else. The water's going to go to where there's least resistance. And that's what's happening here. And at this point, it's really our historic district that gets most of the flooding with any kind of rain at all. Uh, and that's primarily due because of the erosion that's happening over time. Where I remember where there was a couple of feet before you actually, like you have to step up to get into the Placita area or step down. And with the buildup of the roads, the erosion of all the accumulation of sand from all the windstorms, some areas tend to create that sediment that will block passageways to the drains. Because those drains naturally would happen years ago. I remember growing up, there was constantly water running through those drains, where now it sits until there's actually rainfall to push it out. So I think primarily it's due to development. The more development you do, the more you're going to have places that are going to flood.
Okay, so
that's what we're seeing here in our area.
All right. So let me switch gears here slightly. Is there somebody? Oh, Joanna, you're now back on the call. Can you tell us a little bit about what Hudspeth County's experience has been during floods and what your issues are?
Yeah, certainly. I'd be happy to. Thank you. You know, this past year we had a pretty good monsoon season, and I know in Sierra Blanca, where I live, one of the main roads, we had a bridge completely wash out. That road, you know, there's not a whole lot of people that live there. However, the ranchers that are there, we were trapped for about 5 days where we couldn't get in or out because of flooding on one side that was really, really deep, and the other side, the bridge was completely washed out. Obviously, it's an older bridge, but it's significant. So that was in the Sierra Blanca side in Fort Hancock. They just have flash flooding in these areas where they're kind of booming with these residential homes. There's a lot of illegal subdivisions going on, so that's not helping. It's dirt roads, but the main county roads, one of them in particular, where one of our commissioners lives on, they only got one rain this year. They got very little, and I mean, it was. I sent Omar the video. It was a river of probably 30-foot wide road, you know, by 100 feet long that just flash floods, and we're growing concern there because the population is growing.
Can you point out on the map here where the population is going? Can you, Lily, can you go down to look at Fort Hancock by the river?
Yes.
And I know I have a 2019 study that was done, and there's 650 houses that were identified. Part of our issue that makes it, you know, on top of the illegal subdividing, is there's a lot of individuals that live there that aren't legal, so they don't file in the census. So we really struggle with how many residents we truly have. I think it showed like 1,500, but I wouldn't doubt if it was double that.
That's 650 houses that were built, or 650 houses at risk, or what was that?
There were 654 total housing units in that area existing in 2019.
Okay. So we're looking now at the area along the river. I presume that's where the development's happening, is between El Paso County headed into Hudspeth County. Is that what we're talking about?
Correct.
Lily, can you zoom out just a little bit where we see the border of El Paso County?
So that, you know, that's what we've actually experienced. And then we've got dams that are definitely, we've never had an EAP on, and we're trying to work to get some emergency plans and see where they are.
Could you send us what your needs are in terms of and those dams provide flood control, correct?
Correct.
Right. So, Lily, can you pull on your dam layer there?
Yes.
So I presume we're talking about these dams that we're seeing in this.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So.
And last week inspections were done, so hopefully we'll get an update here soon. The Alamos are really big because, you know, these were created back in I think the late 50s, early 60s for farmers, where there's only a few families, and you know, that's grown. It's no longer the case.
So the development is happening where we're seeing Alamo, Alto, and.
No, it is in Fort Hancock. Those are just the dams I'm referring to.
Okay, but the expansion of the development is in
Fort Hancock proper.
In Fort Hancock proper, okay. And the 650 houses were in Fort Hancock.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
For that Colonia study that was done.
Do you have any other? Do you have any experiences during floods relating to flows coming out of the arroyos into the river terrace?
What coming out?
Flows or sediment. Do you have any flow or sediment issues coming out of the arroyos coming into the terrace?
You know, probably. I'm not very well versed in this. I'm just learning as I go and seeing what the issues are as I've been given this role. So I'm not sure.
All right. So I think, is there anybody else that wants to speak about their experience? Otherwise, we're going to, while this is all fresh in our minds, we're going to make up a list of needs that comes from this experience. We have about an hour to do this before we have to switch to voting. Does anybody else want to speak about their experiences? All right, let's switch to talking about what the needs are. So let me So what we're going to do now is we've had everybody talk about their experiences, and we have the people that had those experiences on the call. And now we're going to go through with what notes we took on those experiences and try to come up with what the needs are that come out of those experiences. And as we go through the talking about the experience, we'd like everybody in the subcommittee to basically provide input on how we define the needs, because once we know the needs, we will then come up with the solution. So given this hour and a half description we've had on the needs, let's hour and 45 minutes. Let's, on the experiences, let's see if we can digest those into a set of needs. So for example, if sediment is described as impairing flood conveyance capacity, the need might be reduce sediment loading from upstream, or increase flood conveyance capacity, which could carry the sediment, or you could increase flood storage capacity, which would cut off the sediment. So we're going to have very general descriptions of what our needs are based upon what we learned from these events. Now, I think most of you in the committee here have your own personal experience on these events. So let's go ahead and see if we can come up with some list of needs. And at the end of the meeting, we're not going to vote on the needs themselves at this point. It won't be a final list. We're going to vote on a process to finalize the list of needs, which is what our first requirement is. So, Alejandro, can you pick up your table and let's talk to it? Can you take the screen? So we had I-10 closure as being a problem on the east side of the Franklin's, around where the Dallas pump station is, just north of downtown. Can we, based upon the that particular issue, can we think of some needs that might be described? Now, the needs, what would be the needs for potential needs that might mitigate the flooding on IH10?
Judge, if I may, these were all the examples that Enrique gave one by one, but when he started talking more about, kind of like the locations as Central Area or Fort Bliss, the descriptions were summarized. So I don't know if you want to go one by one or if you want to go straight to the area that he described.
I think I want to start off by talking about IH10, and then we'll try to aggregate these things within different areas of the city with the solutions. So where we're headed on this primarily is, remember, we already have, for the city and for the county, we have a list of projects that address these specific areas. So this particular subcommittee is dealing with strategies and studies. So the question is, do we need to, what's a need that might lead to a strategy or a study, which is where this subcommittee is headed, because we already have done this in some detail in the Stormwater Master Plan for the city and for the county. Can we,
Jeff, maybe something like an evaluation of all the, I mean, I would assume that the areas where the water would top the freeway to cause a closure is where we have culverts that crosses from the, the high elevations down to, riverbound, I guess, going down to the river valley. So maybe part of the study would be to evaluate all the culverts as far as their capacity, engineering wise, and also as far as their status for maintenance, like, are they silted out? Is there a lot of trash? Is there any way we could, stop that from happening again? I would say that would be a need to start.
So the need is to increase the need is to add capacity to the cross interstate drainage.
I said evaluate the crossings where these areas might be a potential, overtopping the freeway when the water, is blocked from going through the culverts under the freeway. Evaluate to start, instead of deciding. Yeah.
Okay.
So remember, I-10 is TxDOT. So and TxDOT has they have a study all along I-10, but the issue is that TxDOT standards are different from the City of El Paso standards, and their design standards are also different from ours. I believe now they're using Atlas 14. So what may be sufficient to them may not be sufficient to us. Now there's issues that we cannot access or maintain these boxes because they're not within City of El Paso jurisdiction. So I guess the jurisdictional side of things plays an important role here as well, because if they don't maintain, then that pretty much blocks the water from upstream of I-10 to cross. So I-10 in essence, it's a barrier for the drainage system.
So what I'm hearing on that is that the need is to coordinate with TxDOT for joint solution. Is that a need?
That sounds like a reasonable solution. If it's not the jurisdiction of the city or the El Paso Water Utilities, definitely, as being the consultant, some coordination with TxDOT on an evaluation of those culverts would be necessary.
All right. Next, need 2. We had a discussion that, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to clarify. Did you say that TxDOT has already done an evaluation of flooding of I-10? Did I hear that correctly? That you know?
They're working on different projects along I-10, and as part of these projects, they do a hydraulic evaluation of the existing system. I believe right now they're already working on the downtown area, and there's already a study for it, or they're working on the study for it. And I need to get the name of the project manager, but I can provide it to you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, the other need was to expand capacity to convey drainage across I-10. We already had a discussion about the pump stations that are undersized, that the pump stations work, but there needs to be some expansion of capacity. Was there any, do we feel like we had any risk associated with the overtopping happening and not any issues in terms of communication with the public that came out of that experience?
I'm gonna be adding a little bit on those two, need 2 and 3. Okay, we have to evaluate the culverts, right? Then it's the coordination with TxDOT, but also we have the downstream of I-10. What's gonna be the capacity that's gonna be like, will have to be enlarged, or the other option is gonna be go upstream and retain the water.
Okay, add those in there. So increase capacity downstream to receive the water, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then go upstream and add detention.
Jeff, this is Gonzalo. Yes, we have several dams upstream, up at the mountains, which Enrique alluded earlier, that they were built back in the 30s or 40s. And some of these dams were a reaction of the scenario back then. And some of these were built in private property with understanding, in which a lot of these dams have not had, the city has not had the opportunity to basically go and maintain. So we need to get control of the structures and then go and build them up to the new standards that we have to increase the detention. I think that the main problem that the 21 storm that we had was basically all of this not false sense of detention upstream. There's 3 dams, dam number 8, which is basically down in Copia, and then there's the Nashville, and then there's the Moorhead. There's 8, 2, and 4. I think that those are the dams upstairs. At least this half a 4 dams that it needs to be worked out. And I think that will be more expedient than trying to work out something downstream. But that's my opinion.
Okay, so we have a need upstream to increase capacity or control of the structures that are there that we don't control, right? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, so let's move on down to the next. Let's go down to sediment on the Silver Springs Arroyo. Let's go down to number 6. Okay, there were a lot of cases where on the west side where Enrique had cases where sediment was coming down from the Franklins on the west side, and we also saw it where they were coming down on the east side into Fairbanks. Can we talk about needs associated with the sediment, all these issues where we had sediment coming down from the Franklins?
In that one, Jeff, we already built a dam on sediment, Silver Spring Dam. It's just to control all the sediment, and it did work.
All right, so let's
keep this.
This is defining needs, not the solution for the specific locations. So the general need here that covers all these locations on the east and west side is to build sediment basins, correct? Is that what we're saying? We have those planned in the stormwater master plan. So that's one that we've either already done or in the process of doing. Are there other needs associated with those sediments that that you might think of that aren't that are other than sediment basins? What else can we do to address that issue?
The other need, I think, is like on all these developments on the mountain, there's a lot of water going down the street and washing out the parkways, or coming from the mountain into a private property, then into the street. And then into the street.
And the street, and
it's
how
gonna
does
be
that
again builds.
So what's the need in terms of sediment there?
Yeah, but like let's see, some of the residents have the gravel along the parkway, and the water is coming down the sidewalk and the street, and pretty much washes all that rock into the street.
So need is to.
Jeff, may I interject one little thing? You know, I think what Enrique is talking about, we had discussed when Omar brought up the subject, talking about the area where the water is, even though the new subdivisions have a stormwater system and a ponding area, but in a lot of ways, the water just bypasses the inlets. Maybe a need is to evaluate the design standards in the drainage design manual at the City of El Paso and the county to maybe incorporate a better design format for the inlets to where it would trap more of the water and not bypass most of it, which will end up at the freeway or at a point where it's gonna cause a closure. So yes, they design a stormwater drainage system with ponding and inlets, but that the design of the inlets and the standards in the ordinances is so outdated that hardly any water goes into those inlets. It just bypasses it.
Jeff, if I may add what, and kind of expand on what Enrique is alluding to, is that we have steep slopes and water running into these pavements and then hits a soft developed parkway. So maybe having a revision of kind of erosion or runoff resistant designs in order to prevent the movement or removal of those frontages, especially in the parkways. And I think that's what Enrique is having problems, because they're saying, well, the water kind of came down and washed out my parkway. And now obviously these parkways I'll have, rocks and gravels and what have you. So it ends up further downstream and into the structures.
I think both of those are great. Both of those last two evaluations are exactly the sort of thing we're looking for in this discussion. So thank you both. I think we're getting what we want here, which is evaluating needs that we can collaborate on and include in the plan. So both of those are great. So is there anything that can be done in terms of early warning dealing with sediment? I'm going to throw out an idea, and that you can assess what the likelihood is of a debris event occurring for a particular arroyo. In other words, a geologist can estimate by looking upstream into the mountains whether there's plugs of sediment that are likely to be coming down, and maybe you could prioritize arroyos by their likelihood of producing sediment as part of this process. That's my recommendation, and I really want the recommendations to come from the group. So don't just rubber stamp what I'm saying here, but if you want to discuss it, do people think that's a decent idea or not?
Jeff, it is. This is Gonzalo. It is, because there's several movements and deposits right out just waiting to be moved on the next storm. I mean, you can look at the Bear Ridge channel. You can look at the all of the channels on the west side on the east side of the mountain, and somebody with a geological has a keen eye to say, hey, it's just piled up and just ready to be moved on the next storm. It might not be at the foot right after where the culvert is, but maybe it's 200, 300 feet away, and we need to identify it and remove it. That's the list of geographical notifications that Enrique's group has to have in order to move and be prepared. So otherwise, that's going to end up in the following year's storm. So I think it's a great idea.
Okay, next question is, do we have any issues on being able to build these sediment basins that are associated with that, thinking about as what are some of the issues you have in actually trying to build the sediment basins? What are some of the needs associated with being able to actually construct them versus
ownership?
What?
Some of these places we don't own them. The city doesn't own them.
Well, so what's the need there?
Well, it belongs to the state of Texas, or it belongs privately owned, or it comes from somewhere else. And we just don't have that ownership or the right to go in there and do a structure, or even just to change the topography to make it safe.
All right, so the need is to coordinate with owners to identify sites that owners would would tolerate having a structure on their property. I don't know how to explain that, but basically you've got public entities that control the land. You've got private people that control the land. That is there a way to basically start a process that gets owners involved of the importance of their sites in terms of protection of the public? Is Gisela on? Do you want to comment on that or not?
Well, yeah, so a lot of the times, you know, owners, the properties get flooded and they see us as an insurance company. So it's also, I guess, something that they need to understand that, you know, where their properties are located, you know, it's prone to flooding and they're at danger, they're at a risk, right? So, and that the public entities, we are here to protect as much as possible, but at the end, you know, any damages are their own responsibilities. And like Gonzalo saying, many of these like of our dams are on private property, so we would need to acquire those properties so that we're able to maintain. So it just varies. But I think that's something that maybe we have to educate the public and so that they're aware that where sometimes their properties may be at a risk of flooding, or they may be right in the flow path. And if they don't maintain their property, then it causes issues downstream.
So a need is to educate the public on risks of erosion and sedimentation, right?
Yes.
So, Enrique, when you talked about channel washout, is that something that there's a specific need for existing channels that we need to define?
The thing is, yeah, I think like on the channels, and especially like close to the mountain is where the water, there's a lot of velocity on those structures, and you can see how they are, like you're doing a sandblast on the concrete. You see the aggregate exposed, and sometimes even the rebar, and it's pretty much washing, so somehow control a little bit the velocity.
And control velocity coming down the channels to reduce erosion on concrete. So it's another issue that may be associated with the DDM, is what I'm hearing. Both Sal and Gonzalo have talked about the DDM, that the velocities that are allowed on the concrete may not be considering the high velocities that are in the steep channels along the Franklins. Is that what I'm hearing?
You know,
just saying, and under that need, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna like, on some of these channels, like everything is already developed on both sides, but it's so we are going to have to fix those issues. But like in other areas, like if we can control how it's developed and have more opinion on how we can manage those arroyos or flow paths to have less velocity. I know close to the mountain is not gonna happen, but once it gets down somehow.
So either I think what you put there, Alejandra, is either reduce velocity either reduce design velocity or improve erosion resistance.
Jeff, this is Gonzalo. You're correct. We need to have some kind of language in there that says how to manage velocities and energy. It is not, I don't think that it's not that I've seen that. How do you basically, when it gets too energized, too fast, and it all of a sudden makes a turn, how do you handle that? How do you design for that? So it just continues. And obviously it's something difficult that the water will take in. And just it's a small example right off most of the streets up at the uphill of the mountains on both sides. Water's running on the streets, hitting the curb, but then you have a curb removal because you have a driveway. So one part of the channel is removed, one wall, so the water's going to take another direction. It will go to the parkway or it will probably go into the property. That is not observed, or that's not necessarily, other than it's just counted that it's still on the street and it's not in the street. So that's something that it needs to be looked at and described or some language in there. So designers or whoever's developing this has to take into account when these conditions change.
All right, so add a need for provide guidance on curb cuts that mitigates flow diversions.
And changes of direction, because some of these flows make right turns, like Enrique was saying. You know, the water's expected to do a 90-degree turn and move somewhere else, and it's just assumed that the water was going to do this.
Okay. So is the looking at line 16 there, Enrique, is the debris and Sal, we're looking for your input on this too. Does this all make sense to you?
Yeah. Yes. What Gonzalo mentioned, saying that, you know, not only just the design velocity from the beginning, which is what Enrique is talking about, like right now, the new projects that are coming up a little bit higher elevation on the mountains. Yeah, it's the smartest thing to do is do something and control the velocity from the get-go. But on the existing channels we already have, we could consider velocity reducing structures within the channel that could actually at least slow down the energy of the debris. If there's rocks rolling down, coming in, that could cause damage downhill or plug the inlets. There is ways to design, you know, velocity reducing structures within the channel.
Okay,
and especially around the turn, you know, it can be reduced to a point where it would be slower at the turn.
All right, so it need 3 on that one. That'll work. Just put it there. That's good. Add velocity reducing, actually energy dissipation structures is how you define that. So add energy dissipation structures within existing structures as needed. Okay, then Enrique, in terms of debris, are we talking about rocks and sediment out of the mountains, or are we talking about other types of debris that you're having issues with?
Here, like what happened is in August, like a lot of the vegetation up in the mountain and end up down the arroyos, and like you see yucca and you see all trees that the arroyo washed away and just were blocking the culverts.
So
Plus
anybody have any ideas on what need we might define for that? Well, we've already got the sediment control structures, but you can put in debris cages essentially upstream of crossings that enables flow to go through and over the debris you intercept from getting into the openings, right?
Yes, that's Gonzalo. Yes, it seems like there was a lot of vegetation uprooted from upstream that before was helping the erosion of those surfaces. That because of the amount of the precipitation, maybe the substrate was soft, was saturated. So all of these yuccas and all of these sage trees were basically uprooted and ended up right there plugging the going down the culverts.
Let's scoot down a little bit, Alejandra. I think we've addressed most of these. Go slowly. Enrique, do you think we've addressed most of these at this point with these ideas?
Yeah.
All right, let's go down to I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's like a lot of those 2006 that's pretty much addressed that in some of the 2021.
Okay. Let's
Do you have any comment on Donovan area? I know that is a specific location area for flooding.
So the Donovan flooding is connected to the river, right? So what's the need? And the Donovan is got similar issues as any of the communities that are adjacent to the river, where their drainage is controlled by the level of the river. What would be the need to address flooding like occurs at Donovan or like occurs at the Clardy Fox area? Or is there a need that we can, what would be the need for Donovan?
Yeah, if I may, this is Gabe. Better channel maintenance, erosion control, channel maintenance, silt removal. The water has to have someplace to go. You can improve upstream, but if it can't move along in the river system, it won't be that effective. So channel maintenance in the Rio Grande.
Channel maintenance in the Rio Grande.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
If I may add, Jeff, El Paso Water just did some work right there at Frontera and Donovan. And I was happened to be in that Sunday afternoon when it rained hard. So the works that they did, they kind of sealed the cracks that culverts on Donovan pretty well. They can add more to all of the rest of the system.
I can't hear you, Gonzalo. Gonzalo, you're breaking up.
They El Paso Water did some works at Frontera and Donovan, and I happened to be during the storm when it happened, and it worked good. It did pretty good. But obviously the works was very localized, but I think it needs to include the rest of the system to make it more effective.
Can you describe that work again?
What they did, we had a culvert system placed back by TxDOT when they converted that pavement into concrete, and they put RCP. Unfortunately, most of the system was underwater. It was underwater, so through the years, through the open joints or whatever, it started creeping up, and water basically filled in the storm system. So we had a false sense of a drainage system because it was mostly full of water. So when we had a storm, like in 2006, it was just storm water on top of groundwater. but the works that were done back last year by the El Paso Water isolated the pipes from that groundwater. So now the stormwater was pumped and did work effectively. So I think they should extend that type of scope of work to the rest of the system, and it will make it work much, it will perform much better. But it did pretty good in this August.
All right, so the need would be to mitigate areas where groundwater reduces flow capacity.
Correct. Yeah, it totally fills it in. So you have a false sense of a drainage system.
Yeah, and that's the same thing that happens in Montoya Drain, because there's flow all the time in some of these drains because of the high groundwater.
Correct.
So that's a good need. Okay. All right, let's go down. Let's see, keep going down. I think we've covered most of these.
Jeff, may I just mention one last thing?
Yeah.
Part of my time spent at the Citizen Forum at IBWC, where we discuss the coordination between the adjacent communities and the river authority, how the water would enter into the river, like, because it comes from the mountain and eventually it hit the levees and it needs to be able to enter the river. But if the river itself at a high water elevation, because rain upstream is filling it, that dynamic between how the water goes into the river versus you need to shut it so the levees do not get overtopped. I don't know if that's something that can be part of the needs, is,
yeah. Okay, so
those structures.
So that goes back up to Donovan. Let's go back up to Donovan again. So yeah, under Donovan there, just add another need.
At some point, there were discussions to have kind of automated gates. Like at one point, they would shut, or they would allow the water to go in, or maybe pumping. There was a lot of discussions, and it got to be intricate designs.
Okay.
How, which one should have the right of way more, the water coming from the adjacent communities or the water inside the levees?
So Alejandra, can you find Donovan again?
I'm trying to.
It's lower than there. Keep going down.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so add in at locations where drainage is controlled by river stage. Plan for improved conveyance to the river in floods. Does that meet what you're saying?
That, in summary, yes, Jeff, that sounds good.
All right, okay. So basically you identify where it's controlled and then you find a way to improve it, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Let's keep going down. We have, let me scoot down to where we talked about the on-site drainage. I think that would have been at the end of Enrique's discussion. It was the very end of Enrique. Go down to the bottom of Enrique. The very bottom. Okay, so Okay, on-site ponding, number 43 there. Okay. So can we discuss that one? What are the needs? So we have these situations in the river terrace where the lots are designed to hold water because there was no way to build detention because there's high groundwater. So now we have areas that are designed to have detention on every lot, but the homeowners are building walls basically to prevent their lots from getting flooded, and it's carrying the water down to the next lots. Is there a need there or not?
Well, the problem seems to be, this is Gonzalo, about people having a perception of their land rights, if they can do and develop as they will. And their defense is basically, I went and got a permit from the city. So if the city approved it, it's okay. So we have a dilemma here. Because if it's permitted, and if it's not put in their covenant of the development, they cannot put any impermeable surfaces. Who enforces it? Who manages it? And this has been a problem since 20, 30 years. So that seems to be the problem. How can the need is, and I mean, you can probably put a statement on how to stop it, but what do you do with the people already done it? What do you do?
Let's talk about future first. What do you do with future issues? Just, can we define a need, or is there a need?
Yes, there's a need, because probably, I don't know, Enrique, you can probably, how many calls do you get precisely pumping water out of the streets? It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like, and we have already set up the trucks to go and visit those sites. I think we have at least about 40 places.
And see, that doesn't make everybody happy, because it takes them maybe about half a day for each site. Más o menos.
Right.
Okay, so you got 40. Can you imagine?
Jeff, I mean, you asked what is the need. Gonzalo hit right on it. And if we're just focused on future, like what can we do going forward? I go back to the same thing, is an evaluation of the drainage design manual and maybe tweaking the on-site ponding requirements to include, maybe they can allow them to have a little bit more depth in the ponding, to require a little bit more capacity, maybe even not allow it on right now they allow it on 10,000 square foot lots, maybe required to be 13,000 square foot lots. So to have a little bit more. Now it's required that no more than 50% of the lots should be hard surfaces. 50% should always remain, as an absorbent surface. Maybe that could be tweaked. I mean, there's a lot of options, but in summary, a re-evaluation of the drainage design manual to avoid that happening. And of course, like what Gonzalo mentioned, we now included on the plat, on the recording plat, we put the on-site ponding requirements. So whatever agency that is doing the maintenance of the road, if they notice that someone is not doing his on-site ponding according to his recorded plat, there should be consequences.
All right, so I think we just leave it. And for that, Alexandra, put in front of that what you just typed, say future development.
And I think adding to that, it's like when there's like on the FEMA, when they are on a floodplain, that they have to know that it's on an area that floods, something to that they know that it's on-site ponding.
Yeah, that actually, Enrique, has been required for years and years, that we, on the plat itself, we have to put the flood designation of that particular lot. That is a requirement. And right now, actually, I've been talking to the city. They, as when somebody is in the floodplain and building and they have to provide an elevation certificate, they give them the building permit and they go and build and they get their occupancy, and they never check if they did the second phase of the elevation certificate. The surveyor has not gone out there to confirm that the final elevation is according to the elevation certificate. So they asked me, what should they do? I suggested that they could revise their building card and add a box in there that would say, that would at first recognize it's in a flooding area, and then would recognize before they give them the occupancy is to check if they got their second elevation certificate from the surveyor, the second check.
So under future development, say include addressing as-built elevations.
The flooding designation, we're already doing that anyway in every plat.
All right.
No. Yeah, and they are doing that, but what I'm referring is, like, let's say I buy the house and I know it's on-site bonding, and 5 years down the road I sell the house. The next one sees that there's a hole and they raise the landscape, they build a pool, swimming pool.
All right.
So I'm gonna
interrupt this a minute, Enrique, because we have to get going, be done in half an hour. So okay. I think we put need to, we say existing development, do a FME, basically you do an evaluation, some kind of consensus way for the community to agree on how to deal with existing development. I think you two are having a good discussion. We just extend that discussion, but we start that talk somewhere so that the flooding that occurs in these existing ones, there's some kind of plan on how to go forward. Does that make sense? We just don't.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea because it's a long a topic of long discussion.
It's a long discussion,
but
since it is a problem, we try to get a study to address it, right?
Right.
Okay, let's go down to Gabe's stuff real quick on needs. We're going to spend another 10 minutes on needs, and then we're going to go on to other things. So, Gabe, you have any idea? You want to start us off on the discussion on what's needed in your two areas in the Little Box Canyon, Hudspeth County, and in Presidio? Do you have any ideas on how to rephrase what you said as a need, or anybody else? I know Omar, you were interested in the Presidio also.
I'm not able to offer too much input, but I'm just advocating for the locals out there.
For local which? I'm sorry.
For the city of Presidio, and they had their economic development plan involved flooding and floodplain, and so they just asked me to bring up these issues to you all, and that's the extent of my knowledge on that.
So put in review. So is Gabe still on the call?
Yeah, I'm here. Yes.
All right. So how are we? Is there anything that you can recommend in terms of getting a group together that will improve the way that Mexico handles the Rio Concho?
All this is done on the international level and between commissioners, USIBWC, both governments propose a plan to attenuate the flows on the Rio Conchos. So that would be one reason. I think the previous meeting I mentioned the palm method that is used on the stem of the Rio Grande from Amistad Dam all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. The PAL method was developed by a professor at the University of Texas. He developed a system where the tributaries to the river are monitored, and gate releases are done according to the inflows into the reservoir. So this would have to be done exclusively in Mexico on all the reservoirs that come out of the Rio Conchos, starting at Boquillas, which is Camargo, Mexico, and then working your way down all the way to Ojinaga, Mexico, so that these flows can be better managed with gate releases as the tribs report inflows into the reservoirs.
All right,
Very
so
important.
so need one is continue negotiation with Mexico on control of the Rio Conchos.
That's, well, yeah. Develop a method to control and attenuate flows in the Rio Conchos, instead of letting it just run wild when you have too much flow. And the next need for the Rio Grande and Presidio area is better funding for channel maintenance.
Okay, on need two.
Yes, channel maintenance is important all along the Rio Grande, from upstream, Alpha Butte, in Mexico, all down to the Gulf of Mexico. FMEs is a government agency, and funding goes in 3-year increments. And many times, for many years, IBWC funding was flatlined, year after year after year, which is very poor for trying to maintain.
Do you see any need to control in this reach any of the arroyos that are coming in from Texas into the river?
Okay, if we're still talking about Presidio.
I'm still talking about Presidio.
We're talking about Presidio, okay. Then the arroyos just upstream of and in Alamito Creek, and some kind of control on the Cibolo Creek arroyo. There's not too many arroyos that I know of in that really short. It's only 14 miles of flood control project in that reach. So look at those arroyos and see how much erosion and sediment transport is in those arroyos, and what can be done to control them better.
Okay, so basically study, what are the names of those two arroyos?
Cibolo Creek, I believe, and Alamito Arroyo. Those are two.
Hey, Gabe, this is Aporbo. There is another one. It is called Tarneros.
Yes.
Tarneros, yeah.
Yes. Can you say the name again, Dr.
Mark? Tarneros, Terrenos.
The Ponder Arroyo?
No, Tarneros.
Okay.
All right. So let's. So Omar, let's go down to yours real quick. I'm sorry to cut you all off, but we're trying to we have to move on in the next couple minutes. So I think, Omar, do you want to talk about any of the needs that you've identified?
This is just for 2021 or also 2006?
Both.
Okay, well, I got Dr. Blake here. So we did talk about the different, he did brief me on those. And so again, 2021, as we mentioned, it was impact to the district was limited. It was on the Litrevino East El Paso area. The only drain that I saw that was impacted was the Mesa drain, where it overtopped in some areas. So we would need, we have a contract with the City of El Paso. I'm not sure if you can tell us what we would need to handle that a little bit better.
We're trying to bring it up to the standards in the master plan. So
All right, so just say increase capacity of Mesa Drain to handle more stormwater flows.
Right. Yes. And associated detention ponds.
And so let's call that a different one, rather second need.
Okay.
To say detention ponds to handle sediment and stormwater inflows into the drain.
Right.
Okay. Do we need any, is there any regulation that needs to be performed that's not being performed in dealing with those drains, or any what are your, do you have any other issues with the drains other than increasing the capacity and cutting down the flows into it? Are there other
I think
things?
We're not really fully, the city would have to, stormwater have to speak to that issue, why we're having overflows into the drain. But so the drain is really two segments. There's a segment within the city limits that's supposed to go to detention ponds and pumping plants, and then there's a blocking of that drain and a starting of it again, which goes through the district, and we're getting overflows during this 2021. We had an overflow, and I think 2015 too. Which aren't, for some reason, they're not supposed to happen. So we're not sure why we're getting overflows into our drain, our portion of the drain.
So could you provide us well, we'll talk about this later, but what we need is for need 2 is we need to identify in some kind of prioritized manner which of the arroyos need to be controlled to reduce sediment from your perspective.
This is the 2016, so that's all Lower Valley. So yeah, there's it's most of them are unnamed, but we can go.
If there's unnamed arroyos that you all think are priorities to meet need 2, send us that list.
Okay. Got it.
David, I'm not going to go. I think in your case, do you have any ideas of specific needs that you need? David Cantu?
No, just pretty much just a need to find a way to divert the water out of the historic district. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Because we're the oldest community here, so we don't have any infrastructure or anything being developed new will eventually have the systems in place, but the older part of the community still needs to be evaluated to see how we can do that.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so we were gonna go through the other table that we made with the early warning and so on. I think we're going to divert that to the next meeting because we need to vote by the end of this meeting on the process for defining needs, FMEs, FMSs, and FMSs. So I'm going to go on to the end of the agenda and discuss that. So the process for identification and action on other FMEs and FMSs. We've gotten started on it today, but this is where we're headed. And so you have a flavor for how we're talking about defining needs. And want to talk through this process that we're going to describe for the state board. So the general process that we're going to state is essentially parallel to what we've done in this meeting. A stakeholder will cite some experience that identifies a problem. The need associated with the problem will be discussed and defined, and this will be discussed and defined in front of the voting members of the committee with the public contributing. We will then, based upon those needs, and we'll take these list of needs that we develop. We'll start off the next meeting talking about the needs associated with early warning and with public agency interaction and keeping critical facilities open. All those comments we had, those experiences we related this meeting, we'll discuss at the beginning of next meeting, and we'll come up with what the needs are in those categories. And then based upon those needs, we'll propose FMEs or studies and strategies, which will be some combination of strategy and some combination of study and projects. And we'll define in the next meeting what the FMEs and FMSs are based upon that. I think a lot of our needs have been defined in terms of need for a study or need for a project or need for more data. So I think it's going to be a pretty quick process. And then the subcommittee members will vote on future action for each FME and FMS identified. That's the basic process that we're going to propose to the state board. Do you all have any input on discussion on this? If you want to tell us how you felt this particular process we've been through today? Is there a way we could have done it better? Is there a way we should do it better in the future? Should we review the needs that we've come up with? Are we missing something? Is there another part of the process we need to add? Or do we feel like this has been sufficient to let us define what the studies and strategies are we're going to recommend? Projects are a different issue. We have a different committee for that. You all want to discuss whether this looks decent to everybody?
I have no problem with the list you included.
Okay.
What?
Can you repeat that, Omar?
But I have no problem with the list that they included, and if you need a motion, I'm ready to make it.
Yeah, me too. I think we've covered a lot of points, but the door should be still open if in future discussions somebody come up with a need that we missed, that it could be also introduced.
Yeah, but the process will be basically the same. If somebody has a need they want to bring in, they cite their experience that identifies the problem. The need is associated with the problem is discussed and defined by the committee. The committee comes up with the FMEs and FMSs to address that need. So it's the same process as we've done today. So today we're only talking about the process. We're certainly open to adding more needs as they arise. We haven't even heard from a large part of the region. So if somebody from the rest of the region comes up with a need, then we'll run them through this process in order to get a need added to the plan. That's what I'm saying.
I agree.
If I may, through the chair, just to make sure I understand, we are, ECOM is confident that we're ready to proceed to vote on identifying what the process will be?
Yes, so that's the next slide, potential committee actions. And Brian, I didn't coordinate with you prior, but can you put together a poll real quick? I mean, we only have 3 people, right? How many people are voting on this at this point?
We have 4. Four. So we have Sal, Omar, Levi, and then Isela said that Enrique will be is her proxy. So we have 4.
All right. So what we're going to vote on is that process to identify other potentially FMEs and FMSs, whether we accept that and are going to carry that forward to the full board. do the four members willing to vote on this, or do we need to do a secret vote on this?
I would entertain a motion if somebody wants to make a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
What would the motion, what would that motion be?
That's slide 16, the exact content that's on slide 16, if you'll bring it up again.
It's on slide 14 that the process the process that the flood planning group is going to go through for identification and action on FMEs and FMSs will be that a stakeholder will cite experience and identifies a problem. The need associated with the problem will be discussed and defined. FMEs and or FMSs will be proposed to address the need, and the subcommittee members will vote on future action, whether we go forward with it or not.
Okay, so Omar, do you accept that that's the motion,
Yes.
more or less?
Yes.
Can we have a motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Who's that?
Levi.
Levi. Okay. Thank you, Levi. So we have a motion and a second. Is anybody in opposition of the four? Hearing none.
Just voicing that, making sure that as a subcommittee, this is a recommendation to bring to the full group, and as the full group, they'll get the full vote.
Thanks for the clarification, Richard. That's indeed, that's why it's a subcommittee, of course, yes. So I believe we had a motion and a second and no opposition, so motion passes.
Okay, so this goes back to tentative future meeting dates. Chris, you want to take it back at this point?
Yes. So at this time, we haven't defined any next meeting date. We can send out a doodle poll for that. This was the last meeting we had set up before the tech memo. Our last subcommittee meeting before the tech memo will be due. So I think that it's probably going to be a little bit out in the future before this next subcommittee meeting, because we have a general flood planning group meeting on the 30th, and then we were discussing having a meeting, another regional flood planning group after you all have reviewed, after the flood planning group has reviewed the tech memo, the draft version, which will be delivered December 3rd. So that would be sometime, I believe, around the 17th before the holidays. And then the tech memo would be due January 7th. So I think that it would likely come after January 7th timeframe is when we were envisioning the next subcommittee meetings kind of starting up again. Does that sound reasonable to everyone? Or I know it's kind of a break from what we've been doing. But what are your thoughts?
That's fine. We need a break anyway.
Yeah, we've been moving fast.
I agree.
Okay.
And hopefully at that meeting, you'll get to approve all the minutes.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of minutes to look at. And we'll go ahead and I guess send out a doodle poll for that week after January 7th. That'll be the week of let's see, the 10th through the 14th, and we'll see what works for everybody.
Yeah, overseas.
Does that sound okay?
Yes.
All right. And I just had one clarification. I think the general process that you all voted on is still valid and works. I just wanted to clarify, if a stakeholder brings to the attention of AECOM, for example, an issue that they are having, and maybe they can't attend the subcommittee meeting themselves to present that issue, are we okay with AECOM conveying that message from that stakeholder if they aren't able to attend the subcommittee's meetings and discussing it?
I'm okay with that, Chris.
On their behalf? Okay. Any other issues, or anybody want to say anything in that regard? Okay. So if we hear about other issues from stakeholders, we'll bring it up, and then we can discuss it and vote on it, just kind of like we did today. And I know there are some things we didn't get to. I think Johanna McKinney in Hudspeth County had brought up a few issues. So I think we can pick up on some of the needs that come out of that came out of her issues in the next subcommittee meeting, and there will be several more. So hopefully we can then get to the process where we define the FMSs and the FMEs to address those needs, and we'll continue to follow the process that we voted on today. So thank you all
Chris,
very much.
Can I ask
for your
a
time.
follow-up question? Sorry. Just kind of in line with Chris's his recent question. Does the subcommittee agree with the approach? If we identify any FMEs that may not have been brought up by a specific stakeholder, such as gaps in mapping, does the subcommittee object to us also proposing those types of FMEs that may not have come from the stakeholders directly, but through desktop analysis and our exposure analysis?
I don't know if we would want to have that as a formal agenda item for the 30th, because it wasn't something that we had today. But I think that we could, I'm looking at Richard again. So I don't know how much of an issue that is or not, but if I understand, you're saying that, what is the subcommittee group think?
I mean, you're saying specifically that if through your study you come across a need that a different FME that needs to be brought up, that you will present it to the subcommittee to see if they would agree to move forward to the general group?
Right, yes.
I don't see the harm in that myself, but I mean, the rest of the group have their opinion. I'm willing to hear it.
So the point is, we don't know all the study needs because we haven't gone through defining the risks. So there'll be some recommendations for future study that comes out of the work we're doing elsewhere within the plan. And I think in that case, you all become the stakeholder. And we convince you as the stakeholder that these are needed. We basically present the information, and we decide whether there's a need to do this or not. Right? Same thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's like when you're doing anything, you dig below the surface, other needs will pop up that were not apparent in the beginning.
Right.
So it sounds like that general process we voted on would still be in effect. It's just you all become the overall stakeholder, and we're just presenting you the information. So if you all still agree on that need, we still go through that same process. Is that right, or do we need to?
Yes, I think we're fine.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks for bringing that up. That's a good clarification, Brian. Any other thoughts before we end here?
If we can get a motion to adjourn.
Oh, are we done with all we got the tentative future meeting dates, and we'll get a survey on that to agree. I will entertain a motion to adjourn if someone is willing to give it.
So moved.
Okay, that was Levi. I'm sorry, who was the first?
A motion?
I think
it. I'm sorry, what?
Was I first? Levi.
Levi? Okay, Levi made a motion. Okay, you're first. Okay.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Anybody in opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, y'all. Thank you, AECOM, for the great presentation, and hope to see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.